Hi, welcome to Murf and Unfiltered Zero BS Biz Talk. I'm Kathleen Murphy, and I'm here today with my co-host Bob Colella. How are you, Bob?
I'm doing great, Kathy. It's great to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for inviting me to come do this with you.
Gosh, well, it's an honor for me to have you here, especially since you were down the Cape, as well as you usually reside in Virginia.
That's right.
So this isn't necessarily your backyard. So I appreciate you making the effort to be here today.
Anything from my old high school chum.
That's right.
Actually, we go further back, right? We go back to junior high.
Which is only a mere 15, 20 years ago, right?
It seems like it.
It's amazing. I know,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
So when I was thinking about what topic would be a great topic for us to talk about, I immediately, when I came across this one, thought of you. And the topic that we're going to be talking about today is, are you contributing to our social fabric?
Okay.
Now, not everyone knows your background. We're not going to go deep into your background or anything like that, or mine necessarily, but maybe shades of it will start to come out during the course of this conversation. But I thought that this was the perfect topic for us. And I'll give everybody a little overview in terms of what we're going to talk about, and then we'll dive in. So it's easy to sit back and hit the ignore button to everything going on in our society. To be clear, I'm talking about and referring to negative aspects. However, what if everyone contributed to helping others in doing something which positively impacts their society daily? Imagine that. I mean, just mind-blowing, right? So our country right now, for a number of different reasons, is fairly divided. We know that. I don't think that that's up for debate for most people at this point. And unfortunately, I see that there's a lot of complaining going on, let's just say, as well. And unfortunately, with those complainers, I see a lot of inaction. Just their action is just talking and not necessarily doing anything about it. And of course, during COVID, we saw a lot of media that was negatively focused. However, during a short period of time when COVID was happening, I did see something quite positive come up from that experience. And that was, there were some people that had queued up some, I'll say, positive newscasts.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I love that. That was so wonderful. So I see those people as contributing to our social fabric by way of doing something like that. I'm an optimist, and I've been schooled in being realistic. So I understand that everything isn't all sunshine and rainbows all the time. But at the same time, I like to think that I'm trying to do my part on a daily basis to contribute to the health and wealth of our social fabric. And I was wondering about you, Bob. When did you first notice that society likes to complain, potentially?
I don't know that there was a certain time, because I think you tune in different things at different phases of your life.
Yes.
But I do think it probably has a lot to do with the 24-hour news cycle.
Yes.
Right? Because we used to just watch the news at 6 o'clock.
That's right.
Right? The local news. And then we'd watch the national news I can't even remember growing up, but right, you had Natalie Jacobson on Channel 5.
That's right.
Right? And Chet. Right? But that was and you'd watch it on Channel 4, Channel 5, or Channel 7.
In the Boston area.
In the Boston
people
area.
That are watching
right.
from someplace else in the world.
And there was a very short period of time to basically give you the local news.
Yes,
right? And then there was a very short time to give you the national news when you turned on like CBS or whatever, and then Walter Cronkite came on, or
that's right,
whoever that might have been. So there really wasn't a whole lot of time to fill, I guess, in regards to, the amount of time that you had to communicate the news to people. So I don't think we were exposed to nearly as much news, right, growing up.
That's right, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, I think so.
So I'm wondering, since you did notice maybe that back then, but that there was less negative news, and that maybe it's ramped up over time just because of all the choices of ways we can obtain the news, if you will. At what point did you consider maybe doing something about this, maybe to counteract some of the things that you were feeling, seeing, experiencing?
So I think throughout my life, at least growing up in the town that we came from, right, which is Lexington.
Right.
So we're kind of cued into this idea of, well, we're supposed to volunteer. We're supposed to, not, beat the British, but, this idea that, how did that all happen? Well, it was a bunch of volunteers that went out and said, we're going to make change.
Yes.
And I think oftentimes we forget that we can be the change that we want to see around us. And so it becomes a question of, well, what can I do, right?
Yes.
So what are my, and when you, for me so I was an Air Force officer,
Mm-hmm.
and I flew airplanes, flew bombers in the Air Force for years, and you're always in a squadron, and you're and that whole base mentality, because you live on an Air Force base with
Right.
other people, and so you tend to take care of each other. And so when folks went off to Desert Storm for the first time, I was in the middle of upgrading from being a co-pilot to being an aircraft commander, and so I wasn't qualified in the airplane anymore, because once you start training for that new job, you're no longer qualified in your old job. And then, of course, the thing that you've been training for, for the past 4 years as a young guy that I was at the time, I couldn't go.
Right.
So I was stuck there at Fort Smith Air Force Base while everyone else was deploying to go over and fight this war. And of course, at the time, you think, oh, there's never going to be, I'm not going to get to do this thing that I really want to do. Not do because you want to be part of it, right?
Sure.
There's that
Part of
you. Yeah, you're part of the team and you're left behind. So my friend and I, who were left behind, we were, and there weren't any airplanes to fly because they all, so we shoveled snow. I mean, that was what we did because
For other people.
right? Because everyone was gone.
Sure.
And so it would snow, and it was Michigan in the winter. So we, with our shovels, we would go and shovel.
I love that.
Right, but and other things too. But you get used to taking care of each other in that community. So it became a natural thing when we were in Virginia and our kids were getting older, and so there wasn't as much to do with regard to soccer and those types of things that weren't taking up our time. You're like, what do you do with this time that's now on your hands?
All these planned activities that you used to have and such, and
Right.
You've got some extra.
Yeah, so you have this time,
on
and you have these talents
That's right.
that you've acquired over time, and where do you put that? And we were actually at church one morning, and they had this display on. They were talking about this Appalachian home building ministry that the church did, and it was a group of guys from the Knights of Columbus.
I'm glad you brought this up.
Yeah. So and it was this. They would go to Kentucky every year, and they build a house. They build an entire house.
Who gets the house?
There's a bunch. The families will apply for it,
Okay.
and then there's a ministry there in Kentucky where I can't remember the name of it now. It'll come to me in a minute, but I think it's the Sisters of the Poor.
Okay.
And they choose a family
Uh-huh.
each year, and we build a house, and we've built I think close to 50 homes since the 70s. So I only started doing it in 2016. I think was the first house I went and built. But when I saw that, I was like, oh man, I want to be part of that. That really, that hit me as
That
like,
really lit you up.
yeah, I was really, really kind of fired up about it. And so, so I joined the Knights of Columbus because in order to go, you had to be a knight. So I joined the Knights of Columbus. And like any
I didn't know that.
like any organization out there,
Sure.
right? It's always the bait and switch, right? So
What did you think you're getting into?
Right. So what winds up happening is, the guy who's the Grand Knight, who's the person in charge, says, hey, we would really like to start this ministry where we could help some of our parishioners with home repairs. Like we have a lot of widows, we have a lot of,
Sure.
like families where, dad's deployed or whatever.
Right.
We want to be able to respond to that. Would you head that up? And so I said yes, right? Because I had time and I had those talents I love doing home repairs and really enjoy doing it. And so that became, another way to give back throughout the year.
Right.
But then when we came time in
Locally.
locally, and then of course going and doing the home building in Appalachia, which is really just a wonderful ministry because it's a family that usually is living in a trailer that's dilapidated.
Sure.
And we go in, and as long as they own the piece of land and they fit other criteria, like they have to have employment, they have to be able to take care of the home. But the church donates all the money for it, and we go build every year, and it's like $120,000.
That's a lot.
Enterprise.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is, and it's a really a beautiful thing because you realize, as you're whatever it is you're picking up and touching and building, that someone from your parish, gave of their money, right, of their treasure,
Right.
for us to be able to do this. And so that really for me was an opening to wanting to do more, wanting
to
to
do more.
wanting
Sure.
to just kind of help out in those ways. But again, growing up in Lexington, I was a Boy Scout, and we would do service projects and we
Sure.
would do things of that nature. So this idea of giving back was always part of my fabric growing up, and I've just always felt like we really we have a duty, I think, to try and make our communities a better place, make our world a better place, and we can. There's a lot of different ways to do that. A lot of times, people will say to me, "Well, thank you for your service, right? For being in the military." And what I always like to say back to them is, thank you for making freedom something worth fighting for.
There you go.
Right. So
Yes,
meaning,
exactly.
like, how do we make the world we live in a better place? So
That's right.
yeah.
So, like you're a Boy Scout, but I wasn't a Boy Scout. I was a campfire girl. So I started this quest through my mother. My mother was really the catalyst for me to think about doing.
Love your mom.
Thank you, Emily. Shout out to Emily. She's amazing. She was a nurse, and when I was in, elementary school, probably 6th grade or something like that, and then into junior high, she started bringing me to her work, which was a nursing home where there were people at all various levels of whatever they could do medically, right?
Right. Yeah.
But she knew that I didn't have a lot of skills at that point, but that I was a friendly person, and that one of the things I could do and help her out with, because she had a bad back, was to make beds. So she taught me how to make hospital beds. And, it's still to this day, I know how to make that bed a certain way with the sheets and everything. Nowadays, we can kind of cheat with some of our sheets. They're a little bit more modern, if you will, right? But it gave me a sense of, gosh, this is such a small thing that I'm doing, but people are really excited about the fact that I'm putting together a clean bed for them, and it sparked something in me to want to do more and to continue to do more. So I credit my mom for giving me this, if you will, purpose for helping others.
The heart of a servant, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, a servant's heart, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect to have that sort of influence or that experience that young, and to have it contribute to fueling me to kind of keep going forward from there.
Sure.
But it really doesn't take a lot of effort is my point. And although what you're doing, I love the fact that you're taking your skills of being handy, which I know what some of the tools are, because my grandfather was pretty skilled with being a carpenter in his basement. He worked for Polaroid for many years, so he wasn't an actual carpenter, but he loved woodworking. So he taught me, and I was the oldest, and I think secretly he always wanted me to be a boy, but he sort of said, all right, since you're not, I'm going to teach you about these tools that I have in my toolbox. So I remember learning about the tools and thinking at first, why is he teaching me this? But now when I go, being a homeowner, and I go to try to fix something myself, albeit not all successfully, I at least know how to recognize the tools, right? To be able to not only help myself, but anybody else for that matter. If I needed to,
Sure.
If you called me and said, Kathy, we needed you on this Appalachian project, I might be able to do a few things with a hammer.
Well, that's a great question, because there are people who will ask, because they want to go.
What can I do,
But
right?
they're like, but I'm not really good at,
Right.
And so, and what's fun about that is we'll teach you. Right?
Yeah.
We'll help you learn.
Exactly.
And any mistakes you make, it's funny if you're a builder and you're watching this, it's oh, we made a mistake with the framing. That's okay. The drywall guys will take care of it. Oh, we made a mistake with the drywall. That's okay. The guys that are doing the mud will finish it. Right? And oh, we made a mistake with the mud. Oh, that's okay. The guys doing the paint will fix it.
And my brother's a painter.
Right.
So
Right. So it just
he's
but
the
it's
last fix-it guy.
yeah, but there's always
There's always something.
and
right?
oftentimes you're the only one that's going to notice it. But also, it's interesting because your grandpa probably gave you a lot of confidence.
And
too,
I'm
right?
glad you brought that up, because confidence, I think, is something that also can fuel your purpose. And I think that having a sense of purpose is something that not everybody has instilled in them at an early age. I think primarily because we're so sort of self-centric at a young age, and then you go into the awkward teenage years that I don't think anyone...
Not us,
but I've read about that. And so I think if you were to have that sense of purpose, if you were a teenager, I see teenagers ride out being a teenager a lot more smoothly if they in fact have a purpose. Would you say that's the case?
I think, especially if they're not so focused on themselves, right? And they learn to think outside their own self, and they learn to think about their community a little bit more.
Yes.
So, and it's funny because I think we talked about this earlier. Like in Virginia, when kids graduate from high school, they have to have a certain amount of service hours.
Yes, they do at the high school in Chelmsford.
Yeah, which I think is wonderful.
And a lot of other high schools, I think, for that matter. I think it's wonderful too.
Yeah, I think, I think it's just great for a number of reasons, and one of them is just to learn, just to learn to, to give, right, to help build in them a servant's heart, if you will, to, why, like for you learned like, oh, I'm just making a bed.
Exactly.
Like, what's it like? This is, I don't like doing this, but then you realize like the person really,
they were appreciative.
They really appreciated
of something
it.
so small like that, right?
Yeah.
And I used to also, my mother was a pretty good gardener, and sometimes before I would go to my quote unquote shift, I wasn't getting paid, of course, my volunteer shift, I would cut flowers. I would just bring them basically.
Right.
In my hand, and I would go out and I would give individual flowers to people in the nursing home because I thought that was so cool to see them light up and just be so happy with just a backyard flower, because these people, some of them just weren't even leaving their rooms. So to be of service to somebody to brighten their day, do something so small. Do you have a quick story of maybe somebody, that's hard for you, right? Quick, that maybe you helped that you didn't expect to help, either that you saw an opportunity to help them, or maybe they said, hey, Bob, can you help me? I need help with X. Do you have a favorite story?
A favorite story? Let me think on that for just a second.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember a story of you reaching out to me and without giving any names, saying, I have somebody that I know that I think that you might be able to interact with and apply what you do as a person and as a coach.
Yeah.
And this could be...
But you're telling it wrong.
Well...
Because I actually came to you with a problem, and you said, I think I can help. And you really didn't even ask. You just did it. And that's really that truly is a servant's heart for, and it meant the world to me.
Thank you.
So it makes me even tear up now to think about it. But yeah, so a person very close and dear to me that needed help, and I was telling you about it, and you just jumped on it, and you truly did help her out, and,
Thank you.
And helped her get to a better place, and through your skills as a life coach. Right. And all that you do, and
well, not necessarily life coach.
Yeah,
Yes,
sorry, but as a coach, yes,
exactly.
Yeah, but you made a big impact.
Because there are people that are life coaches,
right? So
I don't want to take away from them.
No. and no, it made a huge difference to So that would be my favorite story.
Good.
Of someone that you helped, but
thank you.
But for me, I think so. There's a woman in our church, and I won't share her name with you, but she's from, I can't remember exactly where in Africa that she's from, but it's from a equatorial country that she's from. So she's very tall. She's a black woman. She's very tall, and I would go over to her house and help her with things, and she's just the most loving person you've just ever met, and she's just always so bright and happy. And to have, me come over and help her with things. And she probably is the person that I've enjoyed helping the most, because I'll go into her home and I'll say, I won't say her name, but like, hey, what's going on with this switch over here? And she'll go, that has not worked since we moved into this
Oh gosh.
And
time to roll up the sleeves.
Right. And so I'll turn the light on, it starts blinking, and realize like, it's a dimmer, but it's a dimmer for an older bulb, and she has a newer bulb in there, so we need to replace it. But just things like that. She's a joy to help. Right. But the funniest thing is when I go to her home, she's always wearing sweatpants, and she has a very close cropped afro. Right. Well, one day I'm at church, and I hear, Bob. And I look up, and it's this large black woman, and she has like this gigantic, hair down to her rear end, and she's dressed in this big flowing robe, and I'm like, she must be talking to someone behind me, and she comes around over and gives me this big hug. I did not recognize her.
Oh my gosh!
And that's just me though, because I'm horrible.
That's
like,
so cute.
Like if Katie changes her hair, I'll be like, my wife. So I don't recognize her.
You're all confused.
But no,
about
but
that.
Agnes is, I said her name. Anyway, but she's just a wonderful, wonderful
I
person.
love it.
And I love helping her. And she's always just so thankful. She always cooks me food and sends me home with it. And she just really has a wonderful heart in her as well.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love
yeah.
that. And thank you also for acknowledging and for saying that I helped the way that I did. I appreciate that. I mean, it was
beautiful.
truly my gift and something that I felt like it was the absolute right thing to do. I knew I could do it, and I felt that there was no other answer other than to proceed forward.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talked about earlier was having a sense of purpose, right? So when I think about contributing to having a sense of purpose, for me personally, it's to have a ripple effect on others, which is why I do the kind of work that I do.
Yeah.
And even what we're doing right now, just having a conversation about a topic, if it influences one person to reconsider what they're doing in terms of contributing to the sense of our own social fabric, then gosh, I feel like we've done our job. We can go home now. But I think it's really important also to not only have a sense of purpose, but understand what your values are, because this is going to impact your self-confidence, right? And that's something also that we talked about a little bit earlier. But from a timing perspective, I want to share some examples that I have of if you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, I'm still not convinced or sure that I have something that I can do in order to contribute to our social fabric. I'm going to share some examples of that. All right, so I've got some tips. So the first tip is, from a timing perspective, how long do you think it will take to have you change your actions to contribute towards positively influencing our social fabric? Knowing this will be a good first step towards taking action. Another one is, what would be your why in terms of a motivating factor to be a positive social fabric contributor? Followed by, come up with a list of 5 things that you could start doing today, which will have either a short or ideally a long term influence on others. How about you? You have a couple of tips for somebody in terms of if they're sort of on the fence in terms of, I'm not sure what I can do, and I don't know if I can help anybody.
So a lot of my thoughts on this are faith-based because it's just where my center is. But you don't have to have a faith base to want to make your world a better place, right? I think that we're all called to that, and it's there should be a calling for that, right? That you feel that you want to make the world a better place, whether it's your neighborhood, whether it's your community, or your state. So there's always something you could help out with, and it really comes down to is what do you like doing, and what are your talents, and what kind of time do you have that you can devote to it,
exactly,
right? And so it can be something. It doesn't have to be something grand.
Right.
It can be as simple as
making a bed.
Exactly.
Making some flowers.
But it can also, and I think it goes back to, what I said about you earlier, is that you didn't ask. And I think a lot of times for me, like, you find out like the neighbor 2 doors down, her mother passed away. Right.
So not having to ask permission.
Right. I didn't ask. I just went to the store. I can't remember what I made. I just made dinner and I brought it over and I left it on their counter for them. Because I knew that they were still at the hospital when they were coming home.
Oh,
and
that's nice.
And that, it's just a gesture, right? But it's like, but then when they went to bed that night, hopefully, and again, not to be magnanimous, but just they thought to themselves, well, my mom died today, but boy, we really have nice neighbors.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And so so don't ask. And I think that's the problem. When you see someone that's in trouble or someone that's struggling and you go, hey man, anything you need, just let me know.
Well, it's funny you should say that because this is the even smaller thing. I was at the grocery store the other day. There was a person in front of me. They were trying to use their card to pay for literally a small bag of potato chips, and their card wasn't working. Okay, so what did this potato chip bag cost? Very little money, right? And I knew that they wanted it, but then it finally started working, and then they asked for $5 back. And so the person went away, and the cashier said to me, that was a really nice gesture of you to offer that person to help
Yeah.
them out. And I said, it was the least I could do. You know,
Sure.
they didn't accept the help, but I would have done it even if they
Mm-hmm.
had a whole full, like, you know, set of groceries in front of them and they couldn't pay for it. I would have helped them out.
Sure.
Because I would hope somebody would do that for me someday.
Yeah.
So I've got some additional tips. Organizations, a variety of different types, the Red Cross,
Sure.
Salvation Army, soup kitchens, visiting the sick or elderly in the hospital are always looking for volunteers. So consider what type of volunteer work you might be good at doing, which is what you were just saying. So
Yep.
thank you for bringing that to our attention and enjoying. Underscore that. You don't have to be positive. You don't have to positively impact our society alone. Bring a friend.
Yeah.
Right?
Make it a team effort.
Make it a team effort.
Yep.
Why not?
Amen.
And that's a great way to go about this.
Yep.
And then write a list of reasons why you don't think that you can contribute. If you're really still on the fence about this, then take a hard look at them and ask yourself if they're realistic or just excuses. Now, I hate to think that somebody would actually admit that they were excuses, but they might be. You only have to admit that to yourself. So that's something that I think is really critical to give some consideration to.
Yeah.
And so as we're sort of winding down at this juncture, this conversation has gone so fast.
I know.
It's so fun to talk about this kind of thing.
It is
with
fun
you.
to talk about it. Yeah.
Was there anyone that you've sort of turned around that maybe was on that fence, and what did you do just quickly to try to convince them?
So that's a great question. I'm going to take it I'll not switch a different way, but
Sure.
A good friend of mine who was actually one of my students when I was teaching at the National War College when I was in Washington D.C. teaching, and he wound up retiring, and he lives very close by, and he's a member of the church as well. And and his name's Wade, and Wade's kids are in college now, and I just went up to him and I was like, because one of the problems with our ministry for Appalachia is that almost everyone is like late 60s and 70s.
Oh, okay.
Right? So there's
Right.
all these guys
Right.
that are,
Sure.
we need younger guys. I said, Wade, what are you doing this summer? Because he's an airline pilot. So he
Okay.
can basically,
He can take some time off
Right, he
when
can
he
work a
needs to.
schedule.
Yep.
I said, you got to come to Appalachia. And he goes, oh, no, man. He goes, I don't know if I have the time. I don't really have the skills for it and whatever. And I just kept, and some of those things, like, I just kept asking.
Sure.
And he finally was like, all right, well, I'm going to try and come out. So he went out 2 years ago and had a blast.
That's so great.
And he was back again this year.
Oh, that's so
So
great.
I think sometimes it's just a matter of asking.
Sure.
Just asking someone.
Just asking somebody.
And it's not so much turning them around as much as showing them, right? Like opening a door and going, hey, did you know that this was in here?
Right.
And like,
Right.
you could be part of this. And
Exactly.
yeah, so I think that's part
beautiful.
of it.
I love
And the
that.
other thing is a beautiful camaraderie for the 2 weeks that we're there, building the house, right? It's just a lot of fun.
It sounds like
It really is hard. It's hard.
You haven't asked me yet. Maybe sometime
Yeah.
I'll have to contribute maybe some of my skills at some point.
Yeah. Maybe you'll come
maybe
out.
next
Yeah.
summer. Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe
come
I'll
out and
try
see
it.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's a perfect place for us to kind of wrap this up because
Okay.
we've covered a lot of ground. And so I'm hoping that if there's anybody that's still, like I said earlier, on the fence, we've given them some really good
Yeah, get out there.
reasons and suggestions as to maybe reconsidering how they're contributing to our social fabric.
Yep.
So thank you for being here today. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate
Thanks for inviting
you
me, Kate
coming
Murf.
along. I love it.
All right. Yeah.
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us today on Murf and Unfiltered, Zero BS Biz Talk. I hope that you'll come back. We have lots more shows ahead and lots more interesting topics that I think that you'll find intriguing. So thank you for being here with us today, and take care.